Do you have any need? Are you wanting? Oh, Psalms 23 verse 1 reads, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Make God your shepherd, and you shall not want." I welcome you to Today's My Story. This is My Story, only on Family TV. Adrian Austin Mukalazi is my name, and we are blessed to have our guest today. The person you have right here, I know you must be excited to know who he is, but we are blessed to have the Diocesan Secretary of the Kampala Diocese, that is the Church of the Province of Uganda, and this is none other than Reverend Canon John Awodi. Join me as we welcome him. Reverend, we are delighted to have you today.
Good evening, viewers. I'm so delighted to be on this program as I share my story. In a special way, I would like to thank Family TV for thinking about me and including me in their story. And so it is really a joy to just share my story with you, viewers, this evening.
We are humbled, Reverend. Now, because the world, or the Church of the Province of Uganda, has come to know you now as Reverend, as Canon, and probably as the Diocesan Secretary of Kampala Diocese. But then we want to get back to where your life starts from. That life that the church never knew about, you, is where we want to start from.
Okay, thank you so much. My life started way back in 1960. I was told by my parents that I was born on 5th of September 1960. I was not born in a hospital.
Oh.
I was not born in a hospital. I was born in the village. And when I was old enough to see where I was born, my mother took me there to show the spot where she gave birth to me.
What was it? Was it a banana plantation? Was it a garden?
It was like a garden. And that's where it happened. And so that was how it happened. It was very early in the morning, and that is the time when I was born. Now, from that time, of course, I started growing. And by the way, before I even go on, I could say that I am the third born, because before me there were twins who died at birth. And so I am the eldest of the family now. And so at the end of it all, that's how things started.
Okay.
And I was born to, of course, my parents. My father, who is now late, was called Mr. Smeo Boko. He was the parish chief of Oliri, and that is way back in West Nile, Nebi district, currently now Zombo district.
Oh. By that time it was Nebi, it is Nebi. Now Zombo.
It was West Nile, and then West Nile was divided into two, into Nebi and Arua, and so we're in Nebi, and then Nebi was divided again into two. It became Zombo.
Now you are cut off to Zombo.
We are cut off in Zombo.
Okay.
So, and the place is called Marini Alobe. That's where I was born.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So, what about your education? Because Dad was a parish chief, and was it easy for you to access education since Dad was a parish chief?
Yes, it was. But remember, during that time also, the schools were not nearby. The nearest school to our place was about 7 miles away. And
7 miles, the nearest?
The nearest, yes. 7 miles away from home. So that means that you will have to move from there up to the school and back. So in a day, you have to cover that distance. And that was the situation. And I remember I joined primary school. I didn't go through kindergarten or nursery school.
Why?
Because during that time, those things were not there. So I was introduced straight into primary one.
How old were you?
I was about 7 years old.
Because I remember my grandmother used to tell me that the only way they would see, or they would look at you and say you're fit for education, is by telling you to touch this other ear. Was it the same method?
Exactly that. So when they took me, of course, that is the litmus paper that I had to pass. And that was it. And so at the end of it all, I was admitted. So 1 month down the road, I fell sick. And I said, school is a place where people fall sick. I don't want to come back. That was 1967. So I decided not to go back to school. I remained home.
But then, were all the other pupils like you sick, or it was only
No,
you?
it was only me. But you know, being a child, you know what it means. So at the end of it all, I just said, no, I'm not going to go back to school. Until the following year, 1968, when again I joined P1. And
For the second year now?
For the second year. I should have been in P2 in 1968, but because of that, I had to remain at home, and now start in 1968.
This time around, didn't you fall sick?
No, I did. Well, of course, I fell sick, but now I had a little bit matured in my mind and in my thinking. So I went through...
What about this distance as a young child, the 7 miles? Was it something easy for you?
It wasn't something easy. The good thing, in the neighboring place, actually in our neighborhood, there's a young man who used to also go to that school. He was ahead of me. I think he was in P3. And so, and he was a friend of mine. So he would pick me and we'll go with him to school. And then, of course, we'll leave him there. During those days, P1 and P2 will study up to 1 o'clock and they leave. The rest will continue up to about 3 or 4, and then they will come back home. So
you are going with him, but come back alone?
Yes.
Okay.
Because now I became used to the situation and that kind of thing.
What about the uniform and shoes? Were they really a requirement at school?
The uniform was a requirement, but not the shoes.
Hey.
And it was okay. So actually all the children were barefooted, but the uniform, the top and the shorts for the boys was a must.
You wake up, you bathe, you smear yourself with Vaseline.
At times you don't even bathe.
Hey.
Because remember, I am coming from a place that is cold. You could compare it with the Kampala situation. That's how our area is. It's quite cold. And in the mornings, you'll find mist covering a whole big area. And it is extremely cold. So it will be very difficult for you to bathe during that time. So the best you'll do is to bathe the previous evening, so that when you sleep at least when you're refreshed.
Fresh.
But of course in the morning what you have to do is to wash your legs, your arms, your face. You have to brush your hair so that it is neat. Because if you reach school when your hair is kinky, that will be another issue altogether with the teacher on duty.
Well, you told us that no shoes are not relevant. But do you remember seeing any student with any pupil with shoes?
I didn't see any pupil with shoes. We were all barefooted. It was the teachers who will put on shoes.
Okay.
That is all.
Now, from that was primary 1. Now, did you keep in the same school to primary 7?
I didn't keep in the same school, but I did primary 1 up to primary 5. For primary 5, I was moved to another school. That is Eleke Primary School, now in Yumbe District. And during those days,
was it still Nebi by that time?
It wasn't
or it
Nebi.
was a different school?
It was still under
a different district.
West Nile District. So you could move to any school. And the good thing during those days is, whichever school you are moved to, the teaching and everything, the syllabus was followed by the letter. By the letter. You will not see any difference.
There was nothing like we are ahead, this way, still back.
No, because the government made sure that everything was followed systematically. Actually, even during those days, we used to have radio programs where English lessons were taught through the radio. The teacher will be there with the charts to illustrate or to just show to you what you are hearing on radio. And every primary school had a radio set. Every class had a radio set for that program. So that was how it was. And so when you hear radios to be given For us, we had already started long time
We
ago.
thought it is a new invention
No,
because
it
of the
isn't
new
a new
normal.
invention for some of us.
Well, why were you why were you leaving this school? And why among the schools you now went to Yumbe?
I was leaving this school not because of anything bad, but that the head teacher had been moved to that school. And the head teacher was one of our relatives. And so my father decided to say, let you go with him and take care of him. So I studied primary 5 in Aleke Primary School, now currently Yumbe District. So that's how.
Were you in boarding or you were residing at
There
the
was no boarding school during
You were
that
residing
time,
at the head
primary
teacher's
school.
home?
I was residing at the head teacher's home.
Okay. After primary, then
Of course, from primary 5, I had to come back because then that was now after Amin had taken over and things now started changing.
hold on. You only had one class in the other school.
Exactly.
And then came back.
I came back. Now coming back, it was now a challenge. My father had lost the job of being
Parish
the Muluka chief or parish chief, and so things became very difficult. And so I remember I now had to, in order to study, I had to do a lot of things. I started digging, planting cabbages, planting tomatoes, planting beans, maize, cassava, and my mother would take it to the market and sell whatever money she got from there now was the one that we're using to pay school fees. I'll get uniform out of it. I'll get some of the necessary things that I needed out of it, including exercise books. Because when Amin's regime set in, things became tough. It was economic war that was declared. A lot of things were scarce, and things became very difficult. Good enough for us, we're near DRC. Then it was Zaire. So we will cross over to get some of our supplies from Zaire, now currently Democratic Republic of Congo. And the other thing that also happened because of that is this, that now the currency in DRC became more valuable than having the currency
of Uganda.
Ugandan currency, because inflation was just skyrocketing every other day. So the best you could do is just to have foreign currency, if I can put it that way.
But did you manage to complete P7?
Yes, I managed to complete P7 in another school. That is Anyavo Primary School, now in Arua District.
So those are 3 districts for primary?
Yes, there are 3 districts and 3 different schools. And I happened to be the best from that primary school. And
Meaning, it is not about the background or the hardships you go through while studying. It is about your determination.
Exactly. If you are determined, and if you have a vision and a dream you are pursuing, and you are determined to pursue that dream, there's nothing that can stop you. And this is one thing that I've been telling the young people. Please don't let your dream be destroyed because there are so many things that are going around you. Maybe your parents are not able to afford paying your school fees. No, you can do something. You can do something. For me, as I told you earlier, I started planting cabbages. We had a garden, so I'll plant cabbages, I'll plant beans, maize, and this was converted into money that was needed for school fees. And so
And
at the end of
the day, you emerged successfully.
Exactly. I emerged successfully. I remember one of the interesting stories. I was in P7, and the uniforms I had were now worn out, and I couldn't get the materials nearby there. So I had to take a journey to walk from home, which is about 27 miles, up to Arua town, because Arua town was the main trading place for us. And one of my aunties was married to one of the gentleman who was working in Arua hospital as a dentist. And so I decided to walk that journey. I started
27 miles.
27 miles. I started at 7 a.m. By 2 p.m. I was at home with my auntie's at my auntie's
You must
place.
have been a fast walking person.
Or
Or sometimes circumstances
Well,
force
circumstances can force you to do the unbelievable. Yes, but it was okay. It was okay. I made that journey. And then the following day, my auntie took me to Arua town. We got the materials for the uniform. And so the following day, I had to set off again to come back.
Sure.
And that was what happened.
We want to briefly go through your secondary life now. You've made it successful, and you now have to go for secondary.
Yes. So I was admitted in St. Joseph's College Ombachi, which is near Arua town, and now it is Arua city. It is part of Arua city. And when I was admitted, it wasn't an easy thing again. The school fees was a little high, and I couldn't manage to raise that. My father had lost a job. It affected him greatly. I think he was emotionally and psychologically tortured. So things became tough. I remember we didn't have a lot of things now to depend on. And so my father had to sell one of the cows that he had to raise my school fees for the whole year. Good enough, he was able to raise, and he paid the school fees for the whole year. But that was the end of it all. So now I was wondering how I will now move on with education
for the rest of the
years, because there was nothing else now we could do. So at the end of it all, of course, I started in St. Joseph's College Ombachi. It was a Catholic school. I'm coming from an Anglican school. I'm an Anglican, but slowly by slowly, I was able to fit in and get into things. And that school also was interesting because although it was a secondary school, it had a vocational part of it. It was offering, besides the formal system of education, metalwork, woodwork, technical drawing, bookkeeping and accounts.
Were there additional schools that every student would go for, or they were for a special group of students?
This was general.
Okay.
There was nothing of saying this was special. No. When you went through primary school and immediately enrolled and you passed well, any of those schools will take you. And remember, there were very few schools during that time, secondary school. We had, of course, St. Joseph's College Ombachi. We had Varasina Secondary School. We had St. Luanga College Koboko. We had St. Aloysius College Nyapea. Those were the notable schools. And then we had the Diofe Girls. Then later on, Wari Girls came in also. So that was how it was. And eventually, anyway, other schools also came.
After this 1 year that you've paid for, what next? Because your issue was now...
I'm coming there. I'm coming there. I remember, so joining S1, my father was able to clear school fees for the whole year. Yeah. He gave me 100 Uganda shillings. Now,
100 Uganda shillings?
Out of pocket. As out of pocket. During those days, it had some bit of value, but not as much. But because of the fact that, inflation was skyrocketing at a high speed, it eventually lost value. So out of that, I was able to get a bar of soap. It was key soap.
Were you going to boarding?
Yes, I was going to boarding. And it was the first time for me to put on shoes. It was a second-hand shoes that my father got for me also. Eventually, at some point, I also lost one of the
shoes.
Yes. So that now made me to get to what is called Lugavire.
Some people call it Tangira.
Exactly. That was the order of the day for us and for some of us. Of course, some of the students in secondary school had shoes. But now, because of where some of us were coming from, we are comfortable using that. And there was no problem, studying in that kind of shoes or sandal, if I can put it that way. And the school was not bothered because the school knew what parents were going through during that time.
Okay.
Things were really hard. Getting salt alone was not an easy thing. Getting soap alone was not an easy thing. If you had to get these things, you either go to Congo side, that's when you are going to get these things. And they were not in big supplies. So it was that kind of situation.
Okay.
So that is how things went by. Now, the second part of it is this, that now, noting that my father had cleared school fees for the whole year. Now, what next? I had to begin to think through again. And good enough, with the help of my mother, of course, we started digging.
How did you manage to do that? You're in boarding, but then you have to dig.
During holidays,
Okay.
it wasn't a time of relaxing. You come home, you have to engage in gardening.
Okay.
That was the order of the day. Because if you don't, then you're playing with your future. That was it. And good enough, as I was coming from the village, my grandfather had left a very huge chunk of land which we could easily till without any problem. And so that is what happened. So we started digging, but that could not realize enough money. So what my mother rather had to do was to go to Rhino Camp. Rhino Camp is along the shores of River Nile. And there the soil is good for growing simisim, nuts, sorghum, millet, maize, and so forth. And because the soil was more fertile than where we're coming from, you're able to get quite a good thing, a good harvest out of it.
Was big.
And also, secondly, it will not take a lot of energy for you to till the land. You can till, for example, 1 acre of that area, and you'll get a very good yield out of it. So it was very, very fertile. There were very few people who had settled there at that time. So that was the order of the day. So my mother had to move there to begin to dig, and I will go with her, and at times we go to harvest also together, and then whatever is produced, whether it is simsim or beans or maize, she'll get them to Arua market and sell, and then the money she keeps aside. And that
Plus the other one that is got out of what you cultivated at home.
Exactly.
Well, at that very point, Reverend, let's go shortly for a commercial break, and then we are going to come back and continue with your story.
Okay.
We are coming back shortly.
As you think about the Lord just taking over your case, and you are no longer in the midst of it, and He says, "Fear not."
Demons from the mountains, scream and leave.
In the name of the
Demons from the graves, scream and leave in the name of Jesus.
Welcome back from the commercial break. This is my story, only on Family TV. And we are glad you love Family TV, you follow Family TV, particularly my story. Edwin Austin Mukalazi is my name. And we are with Reverend Canon John Awodi. He is the Diocesan Secretary of Kampala Diocese, that is the Church of the Province of Uganda. So, Canon, as we went for the commercial break, you are taking us through how you and your mom hustled to gather school fees. But then, it is very important because you told us you came from an Anglican background, then joining a Catholic school. But then, how were you initiated into religion, and when do you give your life to Christ?
Thank you so much, Edwin. The fact is this, that yes, I was born an Anglican, but I had not given my life to Christ.
Yes.
And by the way, to take you just backwards, I was born in a polygamous family.
Oh.
My father had more than 2 wives. And so at the end, but my mother was the first wife. So that meant a lot of things. And that's why when I tell you that, I had to fend for some of the things the way I did it, it is basically because of that kind of setting that we're in. So of course, eventually, as I joined school, I started getting interested in church things. And interestingly, by the way, my grandfather was very close to the church. Actually, the land that where the church, St. John's Church, Alobe, is located, was given by my grandfather. He was one of the, could I say, the head of laity during his time. Okay. in those days when the church was still very young. The church was located somewhere, but because his land was near the roadside, he said, let the church be located by the roadside so that it is accessible to those who will come from visitors and so forth, and that kind of thing. So he ended up giving the piece of land that the church is located in. But I believe that, of course, slowly by slowly, I started getting interested in church activities. Then I joined the youth group. When I'm in holidays, I will join the choir and be part of the choir in the local church. In school, I was active in the scripture union, but I had not given my life to Jesus Christ. But slowly by slowly...
You're like an ordinary churchgoer.
Exactly. Like an ordinary churchgoer, but very interested churchgoer.
And committed in ministry.
Of course, not committed in ministry yet. I was just doing that. I felt as part and parcel of what is required of me as an ordinary churchgoer. So, eventually, come 1981, 28th of June, that's when the Lord touched me.
How?
How is, I had had so many experiences. Although I was keen in doing church things, my life behind was not the best. I actually at some point got addicted to alcohol and smoking. Life was like
How
that.
old were you when you started smoking and taking alcohol?
At the age of 13. You can imagine, at the age of 13. So by the time I was getting to the second decade of my life, now these things had become part of my life. I was involved with girls sexually, and it was a whole story of things because of the drinking and all these kind of things. Of course, fighting became part and parcel of it. So it was in that kind of situation that the Lord touched me. And when...
Did someone preach to you? Did God come to you?
Yes. Remember, and I didn't say this earlier, in 1976, my mother committed her life to Jesus Christ. And so she became the light in the family. And every time there was anything that you did wrong, that was the yardstick. And she was also a very prayerful person. She was also a teacher of the word, because although she didn't go far with education, she had stopped, I think, in primary 2. She was able to read and write, and so she had a good understanding of the scriptures. And so she will teach us at some point or the other about the ways of God and that kind of thing. But also is going to the local church, and also in the school where we had our own chapel, the Anglican chapel. And by the way, let me say this. The interesting thing about St. Joseph's College Ombachi was, during that time, the head teacher was a Catholic priest, but he allowed us as Anglicans to worship in our way. We were using the main hall for that purpose, and it was okay. It was okay. Unlike these days, at times we find in some of these schools there is a lot of restriction and so forth. But
whichever the restriction, denomination, you have to follow the foundations of the school.
Exactly. But of course there was a reason. I understand there's a reason why that has to be so. Because if you again allow freedom wantonly, that freedom can be abused. But it was such a way that, we grew in that kind of setting. And so at the end of it all in 1981, I committed my life to Christ. But before that, I should have sat for my O-level in 1980. 1979, Amin was overthrown.
Yeah.
Now, there were a number of rebel groups operating in West Nile. I can't even remember all their names, but you'll find it became a nuisance. So I remember just 2 weeks before we sat for our UACE exams, the rebels overran Arua town. And one of the places they came to was St. Joseph's College, Jombachi,
Where you were studying?
where I was studying from. And I was going to be killed during that time. But God saved me in a very miraculous way that they didn't. Because they were told there were soldiers in that school. The base was there in that school. So they came ready just to fire indiscriminately. But good enough, there was one of the leaders in that, I remember it was a Land Rover pickup where the team came, in which the team traveled. And immediately this gentleman saw his colleague just ready to shoot at, because he came with a machine gun. He was just ready to clear anybody that he found before him. The guy shouted and said, "Stop, these are students." And the guy stopped. And that's how I got saved, because
Wow.
if it wasn't so, I would have been shot during that time. And so the whole of that year now became a dead year. We had to run away during that time to find our level. As we were traveling back home on the way, I entered into an ambush and I was going to be killed. Again, God saved in a miraculous way. Our lives were saved until we reached home. Now, the whole of that year was killed. Remember, I'm struggling with school fees and I didn't know what to do and that kind of thing. But as I said earlier, in that school where I was admitted, there were, vocational courses that were offered. I chose to do bookkeeping and accounts plus typing. So my people, I'm a Kebu by tribe. And my people were in the process of translating the New Testament into our language, into the vernacular. And so they were writing in exercise books and they needed somebody to type. So having known that, I know how to type, they came to me. They asked me to help them in typing. And so I went and I did that. I did the book of Matthew, the book of Mark, the book of Luke, and John, and then Acts of the Apostles. Now, again, interestingly, as you are typing this, remember you also have to read.
Yes.
So there were so many things that God was stirring into me as I kept on doing this. And so at the time when I committed my life to Christ, there were so many things that were now, they had opened my eyes to see the need for salvation. So at the end of it all, I had to surrender my life to Jesus Christ, and that happened on 28th.
So we believe this was all the purpose of God in your life.
Exactly.
Wherever you had to go.
Exactly. And the other thing that happened, after I committed my life to Jesus Christ, one of the things I experienced was deliverance from those addictions.
Wow.
I totally, up to now, when I smell alcohol, it is repugnant. If I smell cigarettes, it is repugnant. It just doesn't keep me comfortable. So that is what happened.
Came with healing.
Exactly, with healing and deliverance. And so when people say, this, I know what Christ did in my life.
Amen.
He saved me. And that is salvation that I talk of. So I surrendered my life to Christ, and so I had to start a new walk with the Lord.
Is it at that moment that you now choose to be now a clergy? All this came later?
Okay, the call came at that time. Shortly after that, I felt, although I had not finished Senior 4, but I had done a lot, I could join the ordained ministry. But in the neighborhood, there was one of the East African revival leaders who was my discipler. that man, the late Mr. Henry Ulama, was immersed into the Word of God. Every single moment I find, I'll go to him. Every single moment, although we are far, far away in terms of age difference.
Yeah.
He was older. He will come. We'll have fellowship with him. We'll have fellowship with my mother and also the members of the family. Now, the number of those who were born again in the family had started building up. So we will have fellowship just at that level. And we're just in the neighborhood. So he told me, that's the late Mr. Henry Lama, told me, John, yes, it is good for you to join the ordained ministry, but I want to say this. You've not completed your studies. First, go on with the studies, and then you'll join the ordained ministry. And I took his advice. And true, after going through O-level, I was admitted back in the same school for A-level, and I went through. I passed with 3 principles, and during those days when you get 3 principles, you are sure of entrance to Makerere University, and that's how I was admitted to Makerere University in 1985. And so I joined Makerere University.
Doing which course?
I was doing social sciences.
Okay. Then when do you go to the ordained ministry?
That was now way later. I'm just going with the story still. So I joined Makerere. In Makerere, I got so much involved in St. Francis Chapel. It became my base for whatever, because I remember the first day we appeared, there was a time for fellowship. As usual, I had to stand up and give my testimony of how I got saved. And so I had to share my story and my testimony of how I got saved. And so I became part and parcel of the team in St. Francis Chapel. Eventually, actually within that 1 year, I was chosen to be the chief chapel warden. It was a student leadership kind of, body. And so I became the leader. And I asked myself, I'm just coming from a rural school. I don't know anything to do with the city. How do I? It took me time, but by the grace of God, God kept on building me up and up and up. And slowly by slowly, I was able to gain courage. Of course, I finished that 1 year. I was given another term to serve as chief chapel warden. And so it was during that time that so many other things also happened again. We started prayer meetings. I used to keep the key to the chapel. So we'll get up very early. At times 6 a.m. will find me in the chapel praying as the others are busy, either sleeping or doing their revision and so forth, or studying. For us, we're in the chapel. And a few other people joined me, like Mr. Hamwar joined me, and some others. There are many. When now they started seeing that, that place was open, we could gather together just for 1 hour, just pray and seek the Lord. It was not corporate. We'll just go, we'll get corners to ourselves and pray silently before the Lord. And out of that, a number of things happened, because at the time when I joined Makerere University, there was what one would call the exodus of young people from the Anglican Church to then the Biwempe and mushrooming churches. And so we needed to have that countered. And I remember when I appeared the first day giving my testimony, a brother from one of the Pentecostal churches came and said, John, I'm glad that you are born again. Why don't you join our church? I asked him, why should I join your church? Because there is no salvation in Anglican church. I said, what? I just gave my testimony that I got born again. I know being born again is in the Anglican church. You can get saved in the Anglican church. And I'm telling you this frankly and truthfully. The issue of being born again is not to certain churches. In the by the way, the Anglican church was the foundation for salvation in this region, in this country. And so I had the freedom. I told him, you know what? I got born again in this church. If there's anything missing in this church, I'll rather be part and parcel of what is missing so that we get it on board. And true, God used us in various ways. Amen. And at the end of it all, we are where we are. Now, joining the ordained ministry, yes. It took me time. I finished university. I did 3 years. Then, immediately after 3 years, I was asked by the then provincial missions coordinator, because I was good at organizing things and helping here and there. He got interest in me. He said, come and help us in the missions office. So I got in there, and eventually I was absorbed in the Archbishop's office, in the missions department. And so I served there for 5 years, from 1989 up to 1994. Now in 1994, there was an opportunity for the youth ministry here at All Saints Cathedral. The first youth pastor had gotten a scholarship to go and study abroad, and so there was a vacancy left. And I was already part and parcel of the youth ministry, so the opportunity came, we applied, and eventually the lot fell on me, so I took up that responsibility to be the lay youth pastor. I wasn't ordained yet, and so a lot of things started happening with the young people in All Saints Cathedral, and we used to have youth camps, fellowships, prayer meetings, and so forth, just to make sure that, and worship team. By the way, by the grace of God, the Anglican Flames I was part and parcel of the founder members of the Anglican Flames that ministers here during the 9:30 o'clock, the then 9:30 o'clock service. Yeah. So that's how things happened. And so at the end of it all, I now got involved in the life of the young people. I will take them on missions to different places, including Kenya. We traveled to Kenya a number of times, taking young people on missions. But also, we had a program which we called the Youth Development Program. Through that, one of the things I wanted to instill in the young people is to make sure that they are prepared for leadership. And I'm so happy that a number of them who passed through that program and through my hands are now also clergy people. Others are in very key positions. I could mention a few. Reverend Captain David Serunjoji, who is the vicar now at St. Luke's Ntinda, was part and parcel of the youth ministry here. Reverend Captain Gideon Muhima was one of them. Mr. Colin Babirukamu, who is one of the commissioners in UCC. Yeah, yes. Yeah. Is one of the young people. Canon Moses Bwire, who works with the Directorate in KCCA, or I think the Directorate of Audit in KCCA, was part and parcel. So many, some are out of the country. In 2018, I was in Kigali for All Africa Conference of Churches. Not All Africa Conference of Churches, it was ACC, that is Anglican Consultative Council. I was representing Church of Uganda. Who do I meet as a repertoire in that meeting? One of the youth who had been here in All Saints Cathedral. She is now based in Kigali. Wow. She was the repertoire. So, and others, as I speak now, others are in Europe, others are in America, and so forth. But they passed through that. And so it gives me joy to see this. But having said all this, for me, I look at God as the center of everything. Everything, everything. When you surrender your life to Jesus Christ, He gives you a purpose in life. When He gives you a purpose in life, He empowers you, He opens the door for you. And so that's what happens. Maybe I can touch briefly, quickly. So after that, I, of course, joined the ordained ministry. In 2003, I was ordained a deacon here at All Saints Cathedral. I'm a priest. under Kampala Diocese. Then the following year, I was made a priest. And then I was posted to Bugolobi. From Bugolobi, I was posted to St. Luke's Chapel, Mulago. From there, I was taken to Uganda Joint Christian Council. And then from there, I now became the Diocesan Secretary for the Diocese of Kampala.
So in all these, the ministry you've done, wherever you've served, have you ever reached a time of giving up on ministry?
Yes, I have. I remember one of the challenging things is when I started getting opposition from, some of the Christians in one of the parishes. It was tough. And, leveling accusations against me without any basis and so forth. And I know this is something that many clergy face. But the good thing is this, that I remained focused. I didn't hate those people. Whenever I climbed the pulpit, I will not even talk about the challenge I was going through, but I will preach the gospel, because that was what I was sent to do. And
Not to fight battles.
Not to fight battles, because I know, and let me tell you this, if there are battles to fight, God is there to fight your battles. Just do God's part, God do your part. That's what I believe in. And indeed, God was able to fight that battle. By the time I left that parish, I was on top of things. And up to now, they keep on referring to me.
Wow.
As, I minister to them. So that is one of the things that I need to share with us here, which is very, very important. In ministry, there are challenges, there are oppositions, but don't focus on the opposition. Focus on God's ministry, because that is what God called you to do. God called you to minister. God did not call you to fight battles. That's
or
what
to
it
take
is.
sides.
Or to take sides. No. Just focus your attention on the Lord. And good enough, there were a number of Christians who also came, and we used to pray together. They were prayer partners. In ministry, develop a team of intercessors with whom you can have moments together. You can pour your heart out together and cry out to the Lord. And they hold your arm, and so you become strong. Remember, this ministry is God's ministry. Yeah. And so that's what I really want to say to us all.
Are you married?
Yes, I am.
With how many children?
In African culture, you don't mention the children. I'm also a grandfather.
Wow.
Yes.
So we shall host you in one of our
Okay.
Morning Glory shows, and then you give us a tale of your marriage life.
Okay.
Well, but as we wind up, what is your last message to our viewers?
My last message is a scripture in Colossians chapter 3, verse 23 and 24. And maybe I can read it quickly so that we are able to get it very clearly. Colossians chapter 3, verse 23 says, "Whatever you do, work at it with all your heart as working for the Lord, not for men, since you know that you will receive an inheritance from the Lord as a reward. It is the Lord Christ you are serving." And I want to leave that as a focus for us. Those who are in ministry, those who want to join ministry, make this your focus. Serve the Lord. God will open doors for you. Doors that nobody will close. Even as I talk now, I've been to a number of places. How would I have managed to go to America, to Europe, and so forth? But God opened the door for me. And that is what it is.
Don't run after the door. Serve the Lord, God will open the doors.
Exactly.
Wow, thank you so much. We are indeed glad.
Amen.
This is really a very powerful message, and I believe it has changed someone's life out there. And we shall keep on meditating upon these words, and their testimonies will come in.
Amen.
Thank you so much. We are blessed. And thank you so much, you our esteemed viewers who started with us, and you are still with us. Thank you so much for loving Family TV. Thank you so much for loving my story. Edwin Austin Mukalazi is my name. I've worked with Jonah Jath, the producer, Tony Santo on social media, alongside Brenda T. Jakira, and then Bantam in transmission. But of course, there is a very big team that you don't see that puts ideas together so that you see this beautiful or this nice looking picture into your face. We really love you so much. Good night and God bless you.